Welcome. I'm so glad you're joining me. For those of you who are just starting, the Orca Swim Show is a weekly show where I bring both information about how the brain works when embarking on change, especially something that is fearful, and we take it to the lab of the swimming pool. After 30 years of teaching in the pool, it's time to hop out of the water and share how the learning works in and out of the water in the same way. The water is a perfect lab to test the learning process because you get fast and immediate feedback along with very satisfying rewards when you focus on the needs of the brain-body connection and not just a list of skills. Then you can obtain lasting and satisfying results. Our pool is a warm 92. Let's hop in and go from regret and missing out to action and
Hi,
freedom.
welcome. So, today's topic is how to learn to swim on your own. Now, I'm going to take us down, a little path here. So, recently, I stood before an audience of 100 people to pitch my business to try and win $10,000. Today, I want to share with you about that experience and how my work teaching people overcoming fear shaped that experience, and how I would have rewritten my speech that maybe would have made us a winner, since we were a winner in lesson learned category, but not a winner in money earned category. So the speech I gave started with my own swim story. My swim story where I taught myself to swim, and that's why it's a good match for today's topic. So here's my swim story. When I was a little girl, my mom diligently took me to swimming lessons. And I'd get into the pool and I'd line up the edge with all the other little kids. And the teacher would say, "Swim out to me." And I'd say, "Okay, but don't step back." And she'd say, "All right." And I'd take a breath and I'd put my face in the water and I'd start to swim out to her. And then I would see her step back. And I would stand up with all my 6-year-old defiance and say, "You lied." I lost trust. There was a complete loss of trust with the teacher. Now, there wasn't a loss of trust with myself or with the water, but I did have this loss of trust with the teacher, such that I never ended up finishing a swimming lesson. I would drop out for one reason or another. I have a tummy ache, I have an ear infection, I refused to go. Whatever it was, I never finished a swimming lesson. Obviously, that's not the end of the story, or probably not the end of the story, if I do weekly YouTube videos about learning to swim. So because I didn't have this loss of trust, and I grew up in a community of swimmers. My parents could swim. We did swimming activities as a family. It's what we did for summer vacations and holidays. And it was part of my culture that I grew up in. And so I was surrounded by the belief that I could swim. And I didn't have a loss of trust in the water or myself, just a loss of trust in the teacher. So I would do things like, back in the day, I would pull out the phone book and I would look through it and I would find the phone number of our local community center pool and I'd call them and I'd find out what time open swim was and how much it cost. And then I'd tell my mom, "Please go drop me off at the pool at 3 o'clock with 50 cents. Now why I had this tenacity around swimming, I don't know. I mean, I definitely have a bent towards swimming. There are other things I didn't have that for, as I've mentioned in the past or will be in some future episodes. I don't have this around dancing, but I won't go into that today. But I would go and my mom would drop me off at the pool, lifeguarded pool, and it was a huge pool, huge, huge pool. It's the length of an Olympic pool, which Most standard lap pools that you see are half the distance of an Olympic pool, just to give you some perspective. So it was a very big pool, and most of the people were over in the shallow end where the steps were and whatnot. That's where lots of people were, and it'd always be really crowded over there. And I would never get in over there. I scoped out way out at the other end of the pool where there was a lifeguard chair, and I would position myself in a place that really not very many other people were at. It was way far away from the attraction of the diving board. It was way far away from the shallow end. So I kind of had this private little zone to myself. And it was close to the lifeguard, and there was a lane line in there too. And I just found this little zone and place, and I would get in and I'd play a game I called Lost in Outer Space. And I'd say, what happens if I do this? Or what happens if I do that? And I just moved and discovered my body and took whatever that curiosity is that I had that drove me to get my mom to drop me off there. I'm sure she was happy to like, oh yes, get out of my hair for a couple of hours. But I just got in and I played and discovered. And I can even see like this little triangle of space I created between the wall and the lane line. And I just played in this little zone and I figured it out. And then I went into other zones and I would go off the diving board and do other things like that. And one day I told my mom, I want to join the swim team. And she asked me, well, do you know how to swim? And in retrospect, when I think about that story, I think that's very interesting that she dropped me off at the pool all the time, thinking I didn't know how to swim. But at any rate, I think what she really meant by that is, do you know how to do the strokes that are used in the swim team? Because we use this word swim for multiple things. I told her, yes, I know how to swim, because I knew I was safe in the water and I was confident with how my body worked in the water. Did I know all the strokes? Probably not really. I knew them well enough. I could watch what somebody else was doing and I could copy it. But because I had this internal confidence and understanding of how the water worked, my ability to copy what other people was doing was enough. And then on the swim team, I did learn to hone in my strokes really well. And I learned those steps there. But I really taught myself how to swim by doing the things that were fun and easy and discovery for me. Now, if you remember where I started with this, I said when I gave this speech, I talked about my swim story. I did not tell them this full swim story. So if you're thinking, well, no wonder she lost, that was too long of a story to give up on a stage. I didn't give all that. I gave small parts of that. And I mixed it in talking about the comparison of the other 50% of the adult population that doesn't share my swim story, who don't know how to swim, who are afraid in water, maybe like you. And I really looked at what the fundamental differences was between my swim story and other people's swim stories. And it's not about the skills, but it's about trust in yourself, in myself in that case, the opportunity and the community culture. It's those three things that were fundamental for me to be able to learn to swim. And those three things are fundamentally missing for people who don't know how to swim as adults. Learning of the skills is just secondary. That is what comes after having these fundamental parts. Since the pitch a couple weeks ago, I have been thinking about it, of course, especially since I didn't win, and how could I have made it better and more relatable? And this is partly what I wanted to share to you, because I really want you to get this part that learning something new is not about the skills. That is secondary. So when we think about swimming or sports activities, they're very much seen as an acquisition of skills. Either someone gave you the skills, um, or taught them to you, or sometimes we think someone just inherently has them somehow. This, however, is not where learning starts or what keeps learning growing. All right, here's the example that I think may have been useful in my pitch and may be useful for you. So standing up on that stage, I was nervous. And my fellow finalists, they were also nervous and jittery with anxiety. And it's most likely that you would feel the same way if our places were changed. Most people feel anxious about standing on stage. Now, there are some skills that go into giving a good speech. Things like being able to communicate, having a functioning slideshow, being able to memorize things, and so on. Things I remember being taught in school back from, when you learn to give a book report or show and tell, or later in college presenting research. Now, all the skill development in the world is not what gets you up on the stage and prevents you from going from nervous to being paralyzed with fear. There are many people who say speaking on stage is their number one fear. Now, is this because they can't create a PowerPoint slide, or they don't know how to communicate, or don't know how to memorize things? Highly unlikely. Let's take communication. This could include the ability to speak the language of the audience, or to use sign language, and maybe with an interpreter, or to use a computer-generated voice for somebody who's paralyzed. There is no correct way which one should communicate. We have all figured out ways to communicate, but there is no correct way in which one should communicate. We have all figured out ways on how to communicate every day, but that is not what makes or breaks a speech. It is your ability to be calm and present, to slow yourself down so that you have access to your best way to communicate. It is about stopping and looking into yourself and finding that quiet place that says, yes, I can communicate, and here it is. For me, on the day of my pitch, I knew the most important part was for me not to get in my own way. While the other contestants were giving their pitches, I put my headphones on and I kept in my lane. I practiced my speech a few more times, and I listened to music and let myself have a complete break. I didn't go and watch the others because I knew it would be harder for me to just remain in me and not to start to edit and get flustered and second guess myself. When I walked up on the stage, I stopped and I gathered myself. I breathed and I connected with the beautiful faces of my audience. I looked at my first slide, and then I began. My communication skills were accessed because I had the presence of mind to allow them to come forward. I was able to use all my tools of walking around, making eye contact, going on an emotional journey with my listeners, and so on. These skills came forward because I had the presence to find them. Now back to the swim story. When I was being taught skills, but didn't feel safe in that learning environment, the learning didn't happen. For me, I refused to feel unsafe. I also refused not to learn. When I found safety and trusted myself, then I could find the skills that I needed for swimming. Yes, it was the kind of skills at first like you use in a kindergarten show and tell, not the kinds of skills that I would use to do a TED Talk. But I could only get to a TED Talk level of skills if I started at the kindergarten level of show and tell. So my swimming was very rudimentary and basic, but it worked. It had my confidence. It had my understanding and presence of mind. And it started with just that little tiny corner in the pool. And that is what gave me access to being able to swim 2 miles across Lake Washington without a care in the world. Because I started with that confident place and I let myself grow from there, accessing the skills that I possess in my body. To teach yourself is to bring your presence of mind to calm, to start with the simplest skills that you already know and expand from there. It is also about being in action. The brain will keep you in a trap of confusion and doubt. Well, I'm disappointed, of course, that I lost the contest. Even without winning, I gained much more than sitting on the sidelines and thinking about getting into the game. Take some action. Join our online course and get in the game. We will start you like a kindergarten show and tell. So you can always be expanding and growing in a safe and trustworthy way, no matter what. You have what it takes to learn anything you want. The skills are inside you. It's always just a matter of connecting to them. All right, I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Are you ready to take some action? 3 ways to the freeway. Subscribe, join a free webinar, get started online where we break down the steps, making them simple, and we support you along the journey. So maybe you'll join us in Hawaii. Jump on over to orcaswimschool.com.